possible that we can convene here and hopefully do it again next year. So without further ado, the part which I particularly look forward to, Claire Alexandra from Vodafone, another technology and communication giant, on a story from Eastern Africa and UK.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Claire Alexandra from indeed Vodafone MPesa. And delighted to share with you a story that I think a number of you know. Maybe I'll ask sort of who hasn't heard of M-Pesa. Usually there's very few hands which are rising, but I realized as we were actually talking at the table that I might sort of go and explain a little bit what the service does. The service is actually not only available in Kenya. I think most of you will have heard about the Kenya start. We are now in 11 countries. And it's actually my very first time in Zurich outside of the airport. I usually transit through the airport to go to Maputo or Accra or other places. And it's great to be here to talk about this fintech story. I come to Switzerland regularly. I've got family here. And it's during one of these conversations that I was saying, I don't know why people are starting to come and ask me to join fintech dinners or things like that. I'm not sure why. And I said, really? Come on, M-Pesa is probably the grandparents of a lot of the sort of fintech story. So what's M-Pesa? Just in a very few seconds. Think about a mobile phone. Forget about your smartphone. Think about the 2G phones, the very basic feature phone. The youngest of the audience probably have never seen one. They cost $10 or so in the markets where we offer the service. You just need a phone, you don't need anything else. You need an ID, so KYC, yes, we do it. You go to an outlet in the village where you live or close to where you work, and you're going to deposit your cash, and in exchange you receive money which is on your account. We don't hold, as Vodafone or as Vodacom or subsidiary, we don't hold the money. We manage the accounts, we manage the transaction, we manage the identity of the customer, which is their mobile number. We don't hold the funds. The funds are held by a bank, prudentially regulated by the central bank. We're regulated as well. We have usually a payment license or an e-money license. So there's two different providers at play here, but we have, for this very service, the customer relationship. So once you have money on your account, you can transfer. We started often with person-to-person transaction. So those who may have seen the ads in 2007 when the service was launched in Kenya may remember send money home, just 3 words, but that's sort of where it all started. So before I go into the history, and I'll tell you a little bit what the impact is on individuals, men and women who are using it, as well as then develop a little bit the organizational play. Let me just share a few numbers so that you understand why this is important to Vodafone. The team that I work with, there's about 30 of us based in London, and then we have other teams which are frankly doing the hard work in the countries, usually between probably 20 or 30 of them in Maputo to probably around 250 and more in India. Different scale, of course, in that market. All these teams are now, so in these 11 countries, serving 23.9, if I remember well, million active customers. So these are individuals who are using the service on a monthly basis. So we don't look at registered customers. It's easy to register customers. We're looking at active subscribers. So 11 countries, as I've said. And in Eastern Africa, both Tanzania now as well as Kenya, where the service is really at scale, we are now generating more than 20% of our revenue from M-Pesa. So this is not CSR or sort of, a side initiative. This is becoming a really important initiative. So a few words on sort of the history, because it's all nice and good, but sort of where it all started. It didn't start with transaction. It actually started with an idea from a colleague in London about helping microfinance institutions disbursing loans and helping customers repaying them. So that's what we piloted. And then when we looked at the data, it became clear that yes, customers were doing this, but they were doing other things as well. They're starting to exchange money with each other. So we say, you know what, forget about the sort of disbursement and the repayment. Let's concentrate on these person-to-person transactions. So again, as many other innovation stories you'll have heard about, it's not where you think you start that's going to lead to success. So first key point. Second one, important for the history, and I don't know how many of you will have heard about it, is it didn't start only with great, endorsement within Vodafone. We're a big telco company like Swisscom. That we do bits and bytes, SMSs, data, and other things. So this idea was a little bit like left field. The colleague who had the idea then applied for funding through DFID, the UK aid agency, got it, so £1 million, which came into Vodafone. We matched it, so £2 million as a budget to start playing with it. The key thing to remember here is not so much the money, but the fact that at that stage, the CEO paid attention. And that changes completely the equation. You need to have that leadership, you need to have this drive. And the third thing, back to leadership and back to maybe pushing the numbers, as you seem to be doing here with this crowd, is that you really need to have someone at the top of the organization, which was the case with Michael Joseph, who was the CEO in Safaricom in Kenya and who is now in London, my director. He's pushed things very, very much from the beginning. And there is this great story where he actually had the team coming sort of to be ready to launch in March 2007 after all the piloting. And he said, okay, so how many of the customers do you want to have? By December, he said, oh, probably 200, 300,000. He said, okay, well, no, that's no way, 1 million. And so the teams, you must be joking, exchanges. And he said, well, it's easy. If you're not reaching 1 million, you're all fired. That's as easy as that. I don't know how you sort of run the business here in Switzerland. That's the way Michael did it in Kenya. Now, came December, so they looked at the number, 1,200,000. And now in Kenya, I think we have sort of 15 million active subscribers. So really sort of clearly sort of the big push was really essential sort of from the beginning. So now that's sort of some anecdotes from the start. It's all good and well to give you the big numbers. What does it mean for people? So one of the reasons why, of course, M-Pesa works well in Tanzania, now we're seeing some good traction in DRC, in Maputo, in Mozambique, as well as in India, is because clearly there's a lack of infrastructure. So we were talking again earlier, very few customers have bank account. We also launched in Egypt, where only 14%, 1/4 of the population has a bank account, so the demand is huge. We're creating an infrastructure. As I said, I think M-Pesa is the precursor of fintech, but in M-Pesa there's not a lot about tech. As I said, it's a very simple phone. However, what there is a great distribution. So those transactions, the cash in or the cash out, you need to do it in a physical place because all our customers live in cash. So in India now we have 93,000 points of presence throughout the whole country. So 93,000, what does that mean? Well, compare it with all the bank branches of India put together, 100,000. So I think as these numbers are a half-year result, I imagine that probably either we've just reached 100,000 or we're very sort of close to that. So in my view, one of the key sort of success factors, which means a lot to the users of M-Pesa, is we've created this infrastructure. We've not only reused our existing telecom points of presence, we've created new ones. So it's really an important infrastructure. The second thing, which may seem obvious, is connectivity. So suddenly you enable someone who's already been able to talk to people, to send SMSs, to actually tap into a wider network. So we don't do a lot of impact assessment on how M-Pesa users actually probably live a better life, but quite a few academics sort of do this. And there's research from, I think, MIT and Columbia, Surrey and Jack, two researchers that have looked at this in 2010, focusing on Kenya. They've done some randomized controlled trials, which are very popular among development economists. And what they've looked at is users of M-Pesa were not completely shielded from shocks. If there's, for example, a health problem and you lose your job or you can't work, but actually they were able to tap into wider networks of family and friends to get access to fund, to then leverage these issues of cash flow. So that means from a welfare point of view that you can actually go through those sort of bumps in a much sort of easier fashion. And then on the impact on people, and not sort of to take sort of too much time, I'll share a great story which comes from Tanzania, where actually a woman, which sort of could have been one of those two, which I've put here on the slides, was explaining how by starting to use M-Pesa, she's sort of really sort of had a different life, because she had suddenly a lot of privacy. She could take herself decision about how to transact, how to put money aside, but also how she could do that much more discreetly. And the first thing she said was, well, actually it's great because since I'm using M-Pesa, I don't have to actually shower so often. I was just like, really? Well, I know we have big impact, but you know, where's the connection? So this woman was working as a number of our customers in the field in agriculture. And she had a bank account. She was one of the sort of, I would say, most fortunate of our customers. But every time she had to go to either deposit money or withdraw, she'd have to go to the bank. She'd have to take transport, time away from work, spending on the ticket. More importantly, she would change, because you don't go to the bank in your working clothes. So if you're going to change and put your best clothes on, you'll shower. And now she doesn't have to do any more of this. She can just stand in the field and actually just, you know, decide if she needs, for example, to pay someone because if she will buy seeds or something, she will just do it directly from her phone. It means no one knows whether she's texting or she's actually buying things. She doesn't give any signs how good her business is. So infrastructure is really important. Connectivity is key. And then sort of privacy actually means a lot for the people who, you know, very often, except sort of in that case, didn't have any other choice. So it's really sort of providing choice in addition sort of to cash. So now, not wanting to spend too much of this already long day, let me say a few words about sort of what it has meant as an organization for Vodafone, and how, as we continue to develop the service, what we're looking at. So one of the key things has been for us to change the business model, and our service is pay-per-use. So how do we make money? Every time a customer transacts, he or she pays a small fee. It's usually not a percentage, but a set fee. And so this is the revenue side. On the cost side, I've talked about all these mom-and-pop shops, these 93,000 in India. It costs a lot. They're manned. We need to have people who explain the service. It's all about changing customer behavior. It costs a lot of money. So one of the things which we spend a lot of time, which I still spend a lot of time on, is to get our CFO on board. So it's really about convincing these our execs who are looking at projects, which in telecoms, as our colleagues from Swisscom will know, usually have a time frame of 6, maybe 12 months in terms of return on investment, right? Depending on how convincing you are. M-Pesa, probably 3 years, right? So you really need to have commitment. I talked about the CEO before, need to have commitment from the CFO as well. We don't start new projects in new country when we don't have that commitment. So that's really number one. Number two is the organization. We usually have a separate team that starts and only does M-Pesa. Usually we have people who have a slight different mindset. It doesn't matter if you don't have sort of financial services experience. Retail experience can be also useful. You need to be a change agent. So if things are not sort of straightforward, you'll find a way around it. So we have diverse talent coming from sort of different parts of the business externally as well. Really important that the team from scratch reports to the CEO. So I've been known to actually, in one of our markets, running even physically after our CEO to ensure he would get the team reporting directly to him. Again, this is not things which are straightforward when our big business is about sort of telecoms. And then the last thing, which in many cases you would sort of put first, it's the customer, the customer, the customer. So keeping the proposition very simple, not thinking that you've got a great technology solution or cleverly tailored distribution solution. This is about understanding the needs. And for us, sending money home in East Africa has been the key. We've been playing a little bit about the proposition in, for example, West Africa, in DRC, in Ghana, where we launched before the summer, to see whether this is exactly the same. What's clear is that we focus first on long-distance transaction. If it's face-to-face, frankly, cash out of your pocket is still super powerful. So we prefer to focus on the long distance. But it's really about keeping the customer proposition extremely simple, keeping the menus on our phone as basic as possible. Some of our customers are not literate. They can still use the phone and transact. They can do transaction with cash. It's not that difficult to use the phone, but really keeping it simple. So I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take questions. But let's say to wrap up, this is learning about sort of failure. It's leadership. I haven't talked about the regulator, but there's been a lot of leadership on the regulatory side as well. We've worked a lot with them. And it's really about being obsessed. I used to say before when I talked about M-Pesa, it's a bit being passionate, but now I think it's a bit like nearly too kind. I think it's about being obsessed with getting it right during a number of years before it starts to generate the return that we are seeing. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you tonight.
Since you mentioned it, I'll have one question here. Who has a burning question to Claire? It has been a long day already. Anyone with a burning question? Let that burn, sir.
So, excuse me. We're working with a very interesting startup company that deals with money circles. I'm sure you're aware of them. They're a way of lending money through family and friends in developing communities, which effectively replaces the bank lending by large. I think the challenge they're seeing is how to get the money circles online using modern technology like mobile phone apps and things like that. Did you guys ever look at onboarding money circles into the basic mobile kind of transaction facility?
So I would say yes and no. Clearly, M-Pesa is being used by our customers to, I would say, collect from a wide circle around them. So to some extent, those who probably for most of them maybe would go to microfinance institution can tap into a wider network, but that's really a complete extension of the peer-to-peer model. And then, so no, in the sense that we're really working step by step, and we've really tried to start with one proposition and then expand. So as we are starting to now look at how we provide the service on smartphones, how we develop apps, how we work with more financial institutions, we probably will look at that as well, but not for the moment, not yet.
Thank you once again. Thank you. The Leibach Habib Ali, of course, for you as well. Two startup founders with a tradition and startup.
Perfect.
So, to round it up, if you asked us at Impact Hub, why do we do fintech? Well, from an ecosystem perspective, because it's very